Peace and welcome, everyone. I'm Aisha Musa of AIM Education and Consulting. This video is a follow-up to the video on sex and sexuality in early Hadith literature. One of the first questions I received after posting that video was, are the Hadith I mention in it sahih? So that's what we'll be looking at in this video, vetting a Qawm Hadith. Let's begin with some important basics in the study and criticism of Hadith. Classical Hadith scholars used a variety of intersecting criteria to divide reports into four general categories: sahih, sound or authentic; hasan, good or fair; da'if, weak; and mawdu', fabricated. As Wael Hallaq has shown in his 1996 article, Authenticity, a Pseudo-Problem, these scholars were interested in probability rather than certainty. This means that hadith they classified as sahih had the highest probability of accurately reporting what the Prophet said and did, while da'if reports had a much lower probability. The category of hasan is quite broad, with some being close to sahih and others being close to da'if, with many in between. The final category, mawdu', were rejected as fabrications. In addition to categorizing hadith from sound or authentic to fabricated, scholars also divided hadith according to how many people transmitted them in each generation. The rationale for this is that the more people who report the same thing in the same way, the less likely it is to be inaccurate or fabricated. The two categories of transmission are ahad or wahid, literally single individual or one, and mutawatir, widespread and continuous. There's significant disagreement among scholars on the minimum number of transmitters required for a report to have the status of mutawatir, ranging from as few as 4 to as many as 70. Anything less than the minimum number makes the report ahad or wahid, not mutawatir. The vast majority of hadith reports are not mutawatir. Every hadith has two main parts: the matan, that is, the textual content that reports the words and deeds of the Prophet, and the isnad, that is, the chain of narrators that passed on the report. Now that we've covered some critical basic concepts, let's examine a specific report, beginning with the matan. This particular hadith reports that the Prophet said, "Whomever you find doing the act of Lot's people, kill the one doing it and the one to whom it's done." This report appears in the Sunan of Abu Dawud, the Jamia of Tirmidhi, the Sunan of Ibn Majah, and the Musnad of Ahmed. Neither it nor any other report discussing the people of Lot appears in the Sahihs of Bukhari and Muslim, the two most authoritative collections in the Sunni Hadith canon. We'll begin by looking at the report in the Jamia of Tirmidhi, because it illustrates some key issues. This is the report as it appears on the website sunnah.com. An important side note is that different hadith books and websites use their own numbering systems, so keep this in mind when you're consulting sources. At sunnah.com, this is hadith number 1456, but on another website or in another book, this same hadith might have a different number. The first thing I want to point out here is how much of the Arabic text has not been translated. All that appears in English is what's bracketed in yellow in the Arabic text. That is the name of the original narrator, Ibn Abbas, and the matan of the hadith. The text I've underlined in red and the text bracketed in green have not been translated. It's those parts of the text that we'll focus on now. The text underlined in red is Muhammad bin Amr al-Sawaq narrated to us. Abdulaziz bin Muhammad narrated to us on the authority of Amr bin Abi Amr, on the authority of Ikrimah. This is the full chain of narrators after the original narrator, in this case Ibn Abbas, until the collector's informant. In this case, the collector is Tirmidhi. The chain of narrators is often left out of English translations of Hadith, so it's not unusual that this part has not been translated. The Arabic word isnad means support, and I've been unable to find any discussion of why it's usually left out of English translations. However, the isnad is very important in the study of Hadith. It's so important that it gave rise to a field of study, ilm rijal, knowledge of the men, and a genre of literature, biographical dictionaries. Biographical dictionaries are multi-volume works that contain biographies of individuals in chains of narration. These vary in length from a few lines to several pages and contain information such as name, date and place of birth and death, and places they traveled and studied. This information is important for determining if they crossed paths with those from whom and to whom they transmitted reports. If a narrator reports something on the authority of someone they never had the opportunity to meet, that constitutes a break in the chain, which weakens the reliability of the report. The last item on this list, reputation, is perhaps of the greatest importance and also gave rise to a genre of literature. That genre is al-jarh wa ta'dil, impeachment and confirmation. Books and sections of books that deal specifically with narrators' reputations for honesty, memory, accuracy, and care in relating hadith. Let's examine the reputation of one of the narrators in this particular chain. That narrator is Amr bin Abi Amr. He is the third person in the chain after the Prophet. Ibn Abbas was the original narrator, followed by his slave Ikrimah. Amr bin Abi Amr narrated the report on the authority of Ikrimah. Mawsu'at al-Hadith lists 22 sources discussing Amr bin Abi Amr's reputation. Of those 22 sources, only one declares him trustworthy without qualification. 3 more say he's trustworthy, but sometimes mistaken. 6 of the remaining 18 say he's not bad. The rest express doubts about him and describe him as weak, confused, and not reliable. Among those who express doubts is al-Bukhari, whose collection of hadith is the most revered in the Sunni canon. Al-Bukhari is cited as saying of Amr bin Abi Amr, "Scrutinize his hadith," and "He is considered honest, but he frequently transmits on the authority of Ikrimah. Yet he is not mentioned in any of his hadith that he heard from Ikrimah, and I don't know whether he heard from Ikrimah or not." Amr bin Abi Amr holds the same position in the isnads of the same report in other collections as well. I've not found any scholar before Al-Albani in the 20th century who considered this report sahih, and he did so without addressing any of the issues raised in the classical works of impeachment and confirmation about Amr bin Abi Amr or any other narrator. Finally, let's take a look at the rest of the untranslated text, which is Tirmidhi's detailed commentary on this report. I've translated the whole thing, and you can pause the video if you want to read it. But there are several things that stand out. First, that this version of the hadith is known only on the authority of Ibn Abbas. That means it's an ahad hadith, not mutawatir. While this alone would not be enough to seriously weaken the authority of a report, given the issues related to at least one narrator, it deserves much more intense scrutiny. This need is made even clearer by the rest of Tirmidhi's commentary, which highlights the unreliability of another narrator in another chain, and also shows that there are serious discrepancies in the matan transmitted on the authority of Amr bin Abi Amr. These discrepancies discrepancies illustrate the specific criticisms of him found in the works of impeachment and confirmation: that he made mistakes, that he was confused, and that he was unreliable. These issues show that this report is definitely not sahih according to the classical criteria of hadith criticism. They also show why Muslims today must engage with the hadith with the same level of skepticism and rigor used by the scholars of the past.